Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm here with Bradford Ferguson of Halter Ferguson Financial. Bradford is one of my favorite people for understanding sort of the insides of Tesla as a stock, as an investment. Halter Ferguson Financial is a wealth management company, if I've got that right, Bradford, in Indiana. Carmel, Indiana, home of the roundabout, which we'll see how, maybe I'll ask you at the end of the call, at the end of the video, how FSD beta is doing in the roundabouts, but you don't have 1069 yet, right?
Not yet, no.
Okay, so we'll see when that comes. Bradford, is there anything you want to tell the audience about yourself before we dive into the Inflation Reduction Act and Tesla's tax credits?
I did do an article about this, what we're about to talk about. I am a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. We're going to talk about things that I believe to be factual, and I'm going to do some napkin math or mathawana with Warren here, and we'll have some fun, but doesn't mean you should trade on that. The disclaimers on our website at www.hffinancial.com/disclaimer. Clients and employees do own Tesla stock and or options, and we would stand to benefit materially from a rise in Tesla stock. And so I likely am biased, and we'll just take things from here.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm wearing the Tesla Air t-shirt that you can buy at elonbits.com, and I benefit from a rise in Tesla stock, and I ain't selling. So,
all right.
And there'll be links to everything in the description below.
Yeah.
So Bradford, the Inflation Reduction Act, we're not going to talk about whether it's going to reduce inflation. There's something there's some parts of the Inflation Reduction Act that relate to tax credits for things that Tesla does, I think most notably related to batteries. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what this is and how this benefits Tesla?
I think many people have heard about the $7,500 per vehicle credit, and Warren, you and I can get into this later. But what people aren't as familiar about is there's these tax credits that go to makers of batteries, and this section of the legislation is called the Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit. So you could search for that. Encourage you to search things in the legislation, find out things for yourself. Like, people are wondering about charging. Does this benefit chargers that Tesla's put in? Go ahead and search the legislation for charging and see what you find. It's not, what you're going to see isn't going to be complete, because they did this weird thing with the legislation where they said, well, this spot amends this spot. But anyways, if you're a battery maker, under this legislation starting January 1st, you get $35 per kilowatt hour of battery cells made. So in the case of Panasonic in Giga, Nevada, they're already making about 35 gigawatt hours of batteries. So this equates to over $1 billion.
And although Panasonic is not an American company, they are operating in America, and as far as we know, they're still eligible for this credit.
Right.
Okay.
And there is a clause for what's called foreign entities of concern that applies to companies that are owned by other countries or are subject to their rules or direction. So it's possible Chinese companies may be excluded from this.
And in particular, CATL has been talking about building a lithium iron phosphate battery plant somewhere in the United States. They actually held off on announcing the investment for other reasons, I think, related to maybe geopolitics. But now it may be that it's not a wise investment for them to. And that, I think that plant was supposed to supply Tesla and Ford with batteries.
Yeah.
And who knows if that's going to go forward, because CATL is potentially subject to this constraint, right?
Right. CATL was looking at 2 or 3 different sites. What also got me to do this video that I did with Jordan Geesity on the limiting factor is Panasonic. In July, they announced that they went with Kansas to do their $4 billion battery factory. But then on Thursday or so of this past week, they announced that their runner-up, Oklahoma, that they're going to build another $4 billion battery factory there. And for Tesla watchers like Warren and myself, this is a bit of a shock because it seemed like Tesla's really had to, beg and plead with Panasonic for them to increase their production at Giga Nevada. And for Panasonic to be acting this aggressively, I think it's something that we need to pay attention to.
So I missed the Oklahoma announcement. I saw you mentioned on Jordan's video. So they're building a second 4680 cell factory in Oklahoma. Is this near Wichita, Tulsa? Do you remember where it is in Oklahoma?
I don't know.
Taking it aside from the tax credit issue for a second, this is one of my pitches for people who don't believe in Tesla yet. Is there is one customer for 4680 batteries. It's only Tesla. There is no other customer for 4680 batteries. No other company has even started designing a vehicle that would use 46. Even my pod car is not designed for 4680. I might change my mind and make the pod car for 4680 batteries. But for Panasonic to say we're going to build 2 battery factories in the United States and one in Wakayama, Japan, for LG Chem to decide they're going to build 4680 cells in South Korea, that is a very clear indication that they believe that Tesla's demand for 4680s will be really high, and they are eager to supply that demand.
Yep.
And they know that there's only one customer, and they're still investing billions of dollars. I wonder if this might change LG Chem's decision to build a battery factory in South Korea and build it in the United States instead.
And I think LG is partnered with GM. So GM has announced 3 battery factories already, Ohio, Michigan, and Tennessee, I believe. And they're exploring a 4th in Indiana.
Right.
Ford is doing 2 in Kentucky and 1 in Tennessee with SK Innovation, which is another South Korean battery maker.
Right.
So this $35 per kilowatt hour, that goes to the battery maker. It doesn't necessarily go to GM or Ford. And in the case of Giga Nevada, the people who get the $35 per kilowatt hour is Panasonic.
Right.
Tesla does not get that.
But in the case of Giga Texas and Cato Road and Fremont, Tesla is the battery maker.
Right.
And Tesla is planning to build 100 gigawatt hours of battery capacity in Texas plus 10 in Cato Road. So call it 100 gigawatt hours a year. That's a pretty substantial battery factory.
That's pretty big. I think it'd be the biggest.
It would be the biggest battery factory in the world.
Yeah.
I think CATL is going for bigger with a lithium iron phosphate at some point, but they're not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to do some napkin math.
Yeah,
we talked about this before we started, but it was $35 a kilowatt hour for a battery cell. If Tesla makes 100 gigawatt hours of battery cells, you go $35 a kilowatt hour, $35,000 a megawatt hour, $35 million a gigawatt hour times 100 is $3.5 billion a year that Tesla would make out of the battery lines at Giga Texas and maybe Cato Road together. There's a theory that Giga Texas will actually grow to 200 gigawatt hours and maybe it's $7 billion a year in tax credits. And then you add in, if you're making a battery, we didn't cover this yet, but if you're making a battery module, you get another $10 a kilowatt hour for the battery module. So that would go from 3.5 billion a year to 4.5 billion a year, or 7 billion a year to 9 billion a year for Tesla. Just tax credits for Tesla. This is like just added to Tesla's profits, basically, right? Am I getting the accounting right that would basically be in addition to Tesla's profits?
Yes, it goes straight to the bottom line. And the thing that's kind of nutty about that is, in first quarter they did about that amount with their whole profits from China. So right now Tesla doesn't make a whole lot of money in the U.S. because all of their heavy costs are in the U.S. Their headquarters is in the U.S. A ton of their engineers are in the U.S. And what's interesting about this, and I couldn't find it, but someone found it for me, is even if you're not paying taxes in the U.S. or your taxes don't amount to that grand amount, the government will send the company a direct payment for the first 5 years of this legislation.
Right. Okay. So
it's a big deal and it'll happen.
Okay. So my understanding is that's how it's going to work in 2023. At some point in the future, there's 2 problems I want to address.
Right.
One problem is that there may be some additional requirements that become effective after 2024, 2025 in terms of battery materials. But the other issue is you can give me a tax credit for making battery cells, but I still need to get battery materials for my cells. And there's sort of a global shortage of lithium, of nickel, and maybe of other battery materials. Does this incentivize, as far as you know, does this incentivize or make it possible to mine for these materials either in the US or someplace that's eligible, make it easier to get the stuff out of the ground so that we can put it in batteries?
Yeah, there's an incentive for mining, and there's also an incentive for doing the cathode refining. So the cathode is the lithium and iron, or it's the
or nickel and iron, or nickel and lithium, right?
Yeah. And Tesla, by the way, is making a cathode plant in Texas. So this may be one of the reasons, but a lot of the refining happens in China right now. And a good deal of recycling happens in China. What people may also not know about recycling in China is they use what's called thermal recycling, which means that they burn, they literally burn up the battery, and it's very toxic. And the type of recycling that like Redwood Materials is approaching in the US is more of a mechanical, electrical type.
I thought they ground it up and then sorted it.
Yeah.
That was my take on how Sandy Moreau explained it. Was they basically grind up the battery pack into powder and then use like spinning, they spin the material so the heavy material, goes to the outside or whatever. They find ways of sorting out the battery material that way, and they're able to recover. Tesla's doing this, and they're recovering like 92% of the minerals.
Yeah. So that's the type of thing that Redwood's doing as well. There's some chemical ways you could do it too, and you can keep the chemicals contained and not pollute with it. But yeah, there's a benefit to making a cathode material. There's a benefit to doing the mining
but
in the US,
but
or
providing
recycling in the US.
But providing a benefit to the mining doesn't mean that I thought the big challenge with mining was getting permits to do the mining.
Yeah.
And that it's very difficult to get permits to do mining in the United States. Maybe there's countries that are eligible for this, that mining permits are easier to get. Like I think you may have mentioned Canada in your video with Jordan.
Right. Yeah. Canada, Chile, Australia.
And Tesla supposedly is working on a deal with Indonesia for battery minerals, but Indonesia is not an eligible country, right? So if Tesla gets battery minerals from Indonesia and brings them to the United States, that doesn't count.
Yeah, but they're also not a foreign entity of concern.
Okay.
I know this sounds complicated. So basically, when you look at those percentages, and Warren will put that on the screen for us in post and all that good stuff. Indonesia would not count toward those percentages, the nickel that Tesla gets from Indonesia, but it wouldn't. They wouldn't be prohibited from using nickel from Indonesia, as far as I understand. But what they can't do is use the processed stuff from China and still get the credit for battery making.
Well, this is one of the areas where I think actually Tesla has a huge advantage compared to every other EV maker, because Tesla is really dramatically multinational. They're making EVs in the United States. They're making EVs in China. They're making EVs in Europe. I think they might be opening a gigafactory in Japan. They can say, all right, we'll mine battery minerals from Indonesia and we'll use those in the China or Japan plant or the European plant. And wherever we need battery minerals, this is one of the things that's wrong with government incentives in general, is you're distorting the free flow of markets. But what ends up happening is you just say, okay, well, we'll take the minerals that are eligible, that make us eligible for the US tax credit, and we'll use those minerals in the US battery factories. And then we'll take the other minerals that we get from countries that aren't eligible, and we'll use those in the non-US battery factories. And that seems to be what would make the most sense. And I mean, I think one of the things about this, correct me if I'm wrong, this wouldn't apply to a battery factory in Canada, right? So if Tesla built a battery factory in Ontario, it wouldn't get the tax credit.
Well, they can get the minerals from Canada.
Right. But if they decided to build a cell factory, there was talk that Tesla was going to build a gigafactory in Ontario. right? Or Canada. And at the shareholder meeting, Elon said, Canada, I'm from Canada. I'm Canadian or half Canadian or whatever. But this would be a disincentive to build a battery cell factory in Canada or a battery module factory in Canada, because you wouldn't get the tax credit there. You might as well build the same factory in Buffalo and get a huge break.
Right.
And before we
Or
get into
Ohio,
and just to get to hit on a point I think you mentioned in your video with Jordan as well. If our expectation from Battery Day is that the cost of nickel-based cells, like nickel-based 4680s, will decline to around $60 a kilowatt hour. Although practically speaking, with inflation, maybe that's $70 or $80 a kilowatt hour now. If you're going to get 45, and that's at the cell level.
right.
So if you're going to get $35 a kilowatt hour in credits, you're reducing the cost from, say, $70 a kilowatt hour to $35 a kilowatt hour. You're basically cutting the cost of batteries in half for Tesla. Is
That's
one way
right.
of looking at them. You can look at it as just profits. And then with the lithium iron phosphate cells, at the time they were talking about it, my sense was that lithium iron phosphate cost to manufacture was going to drop down to around $40 a kilowatt hour. Again, with inflation figure $60 a kilowatt hour, the $35 a kilowatt hour is more than half of the cost of the cell.
Right. Yeah.
So
So
that's
over 50%.
Yeah, that's a pretty substantial tax break.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
And what people, I anticipate that Elon is going to get criticized for, getting a sweetheart deal from the government. But if I remember correctly, Elon said, don't vote for this.
Right.
Elon was opposed to passing this bill.
He said we don't need this.
Yeah, because it doesn't solve the underlying problem. The underlying problem is we need battery minerals. We need battery minerals mined, and we need battery minerals refined. And this doesn't. Does this give a credit for mineral refining? And it does give some advantages to mining and minerals. Can you give a sense of how valuable that side of the credits are?
Yeah, so it talks about electrode active materials, and there's 10% credit for that, for the cost of producing that. And there's also a 10% cost tax credit for producing the critical battery minerals, which it defines in the legislation. One of the minerals not included is iron, so they don't count that as critical.
But to be fair, iron is cheap.
Yeah.
Iron is abundant and cheap, so that's not necessarily a mineral of concern. Lithium. What about cobalt? Is cobalt included?
Yeah, cobalt's on there.
So despite Sorel Amore, I don't know if you saw my video about Sorel Amore.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms of Tesla is that the EV industry is mining cobalt from poor children, is killing poor children in the Congo producing cobalt. This is actually incentivizing more cobalt.
In a way it could be, but it's just incentivizing. I think it's incentivizing it to be recycled. Redwood is getting a ton of cobalt from our iPhones.
But the whole recycling thing,
Maury has an iPhone, she's got a lot of cobalt.
Right, but the iPhone battery is one. A car battery is 1,000 times the size of an iPhone battery, and if you recycle 1 million iPhone batteries, you've got 1,000 cars, and Tesla's going to make 1 million cars. So the recycling that's going on today is a drop in the bucket. If you go out 20 plus years, then the vehicles that are coming off the roads, once we start making 20 million cars a year, and let's say that's a steady state, and then 10 years after that, the first batch of 20 million cars comes off the road and you start recycling those, you start having a significant amount of battery minerals for the vehicles you're making.
Yeah.
Maybe after you're making 10 million vehicles, you're starting to make a dent, but it's going to take a while.
Something may surprise you, and one of my Twitter followers, his handle is a Madman X. He alerted me to this issue, period, but he also sent me an article where Redwood, when they testified in front of Congress or Senate, they said that already they're getting 6 gigawatt hours worth of battery materials annually.
Okay.
So it's becoming more substantial than you think, and I think a lot of it's from consumer grade.
But we're heading towards a world where we need 3 terawatt hours a year.
Right.
So 6 gigawatt hours is, about 1/500th of what's needed. So, if they're able to ramp it up and they're able to get a lot more, sure. but 6 gigawatt hours, until you're getting to hundreds of gigawatt hours, it doesn't really add up to a significant chunk, and doesn't, you still need to mine a lot, and you still need to refine a lot of the mined materials.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing that's interesting about recycling is it doesn't have to pass any other hurdles. So if the battery material is recycled in the US, even if it was a Chinese made LFP or whatever, then those materials qualify for the battery making or the battery module tax credit.
okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. So what else is in here that Tesla shareholders are going to be excited about?
There's some interesting stuff with photovoltaic cells. Let me go back to my hyperlink, which should take me down to it. There's this huge list of clean energy type deals for the advanced manufacturing production credit. It's kind of redundant and long, but in the case of a thin cell photovoltaic cell or crystalline photovoltaic cell, there's tax credits there. Photovoltaic wafer.
How much is the credit?
It's 4 cents multiplied by the direct current watt basis.
So if it was a 1 kilo, I think the typical panel today might be 400 watts. So that would be like $1.60. Or is it $16?
It would be $16.
Right. Okay. Well, that's not nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, those panels are expensive, but it's not nothing.
There's photovoltaic wafers. There's a solar module.
And these could be additive, right? So you could have a cell, a wafer, and a module, and you could add it all together, and all of a sudden that might end up being, triple.
Yeah, I think so. There's things for wind energy. I think this whole section is where they talk about.
What about battery storage?
Well, this whole section is about clean energy, and this is where the battery cell and battery module stuff is. So I believe this covers storage.
So the battery cells and battery modules going into storage is the same credit as battery cells and battery modules going into cars.
Right.
Okay. And sorry, just to be clear about this, when we're talking about these tax credits, the $7,500 tax credit for the car goes to the consumer. Although you can imagine that vehicle manufacturers might increase their prices to capture some of that credit, right? But on its face, that credit goes to the consumer. With the battery cell credit, with the module credit, with all these other credits we're talking about today in this video, these all go to the manufacturer, the miner, the refiner. They don't go to consumers at all. There's no, it's all directly to the manufacturers, to the business side of things.
That's right.
Okay. So was there something else you wanted to add, or you want to dive
something
into?
else that was interesting is in the charging section, there was something about bi-directional charging. So there's tax credits for land that's used for charging infrastructure. And there's a specific clause that like bi-directional shouldn't be excluded or something like that, or should be included.
That's something that Ford put in for the F-150 Lightning, probably.
That's right, but maybe Tesla's looking into the whole vehicle to grid as well.
Well, all right. I mean, we'll just really quickly just address. I've said for years, and I think Elon and JB Straubel have said for years, that vehicle to grid doesn't make sense. That the value of your battery in the vehicle as a vehicle is 20 times as good, 20 times as high as the value as your vehicle in vehicle to grid. So you wouldn't want to waste a battery cycle using it in vehicle to grid when that takes away so many miles of use as a vehicle. That's my take on that. But if they incentivize it and somebody wants to do it.
It's changed a bit with what's happening in California. So they started this whole Powerwall thing where all the Powerwalls act as one big battery backup for the grid. And they just held an event where over 2,000 Powerwalls participated, and they were able to produce, Was it 15 megawatts or 15
I
gigawatts?
forget. They did something to help increase grid reliability. I agree with that.
And they gave $2 per kilowatt. Like for me to charge, it's 11 cents in Indiana or so. If I get $2, I don't mind putting some
Yeah.
use on my battery for that.
But so ultimately, these events are going to, as Powerwall spread and Megapack spread, these events are going to become more rare, and the amount you get paid for participating is going to be lower, and the cost of adding this hardware to your vehicle or adding this hardware to your house to enable vehicle to grid is going to end up being a bad investment. But it's fashionable. Everybody loves it. People hate me for criticizing it, so I guess it'll be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
cranky Warren doesn't
yeah.
like it.
So one thing we didn't talk about is Lathrop. So Tesla made the
Megapack factory.
Yeah. And so that's a 40 gigawatt factory. It's believed they're, they
Sorry,
were
40 gigawatt hours, but yes.
Thank you. It's believed they were going to be using LFP from CATL for that. Maybe that changes, but if they were to get that scaled quickly, that could be an additional $400 million per year, just for them to put the batteries into modules and pack that into Megapack.
Well, I mean, it sounds like this legislation could incentivize Tesla to say, all right, heck with it. We're going to start building our own battery factories. On the other side of it is, if somebody builds a lithium iron phosphate battery factory in the United States, the tax credit just affects, in a sense, the negotiation between the supplier of battery cells and the vehicle company that's buying the cells, right? All of a sudden, the effective cost to the battery manufacturer is lower, and they're able to set. Tesla can probably negotiate a better price on their cells because the producer of cells is getting a tax break. They may be able to capture some of that tax break, but it may incentivize Tesla to say, you know what, we can make lithium iron phosphate cells too.
Yeah. I'm not sure how good the negotiation is. Jim Farley was lamenting recently that I think it's SK Innovation with Ford, that they were, the credit was going to them. So
right. Well, I mean, the harsh reality for Ford is a small player in the EV industry. Mm-hmm. Tesla is the 800-pound gorilla, and when Tesla says, "Hey, we want this break on this,
that's true,
on these batteries, and we're going to buy 100 times as many as Ford is," then the battery supplier may be willing to cut Tesla a break where they're not willing to cut Ford a break.
Mm.
This is the reverse of what happened when Tesla got started and they couldn't get suppliers to give them their A teams to help them build vehicles. So they had to bring production in-house for a lot. They had to go vertically integrate because they couldn't get good support because Ford and GM were so much bigger than Tesla. Mm-hmm. Now Tesla is effectively in the EV market. Tesla is way bigger than Ford and GM. Yeah. And so when it comes to suppliers for that side of the business, Tesla's able to command to do better in negotiations.
Yeah. So there was some analysis of this a couple days ago where someone was thinking, well, maybe Tesla's next gigafactory is in the US. You were starting to come to this conclusion here, Warren, talking about Canada versus the US. So, maybe this pushes it over the border, so to speak, to being in the US.
Right. So just to be clear, my view is the next gigafactory is in Osaka, Japan, and that's because Panasonic is building a 4680 cell factory in Japan, and Japan is the world's third largest car market after China and the US. Mm-hmm. So I think it's obvious that Japan will get a gigafactory at some point. I also think with Panasonic building 4680 cell factories in Kansas and Oklahoma, it probably makes sense for Tesla to build a gigafactory to build vehicles to take advantage of the battery cells produced by Panasonic somewhere between Kansas and Oklahoma, right? Because there's this suddenly large supply of 4680 cells. Let's build a factory to produce vehicles near those factories. Does this incentivize Tesla to build more 4680s? Does it incentivize Tesla to say, you know what, we might as well build more? At some level, Tesla doesn't want to compete too hard with its suppliers.
Right.
They want to have battery supply from Panasonic. They want to have battery supply from LG Chem and CATL, and I think Samsung and SK Innovation maybe are all somewhere on their list. They want to incentivize those guys to produce cells. I think the other side of this is yeah, the tax credit is nice, but the real profit story for Tesla is at first in margins on vehicles and then margins on software.
Right.
And it's probably better in the long run to let somebody else do the low margin side of the business, which is batteries, and for Tesla to focus on the high margin area of the business. But this kind of government incentive sort of distorts the margins, right?
That's right. So
All of a sudden,
yes,
all of a sudden, the margins on battery production go up. It might start to make more sense to become, go heavier into battery production.
yeah. So if you're getting $35 per kilowatt hour, and maybe the cost of the cell level is $80 for a nickel based battery, that's over 40% margin. That's pretty juicy for Tesla. Their margins for making cars is over 25%, and it's been over 30% at times, and kind of expected to go higher by year end.
Right, but the real margins for Tesla down the road, and Elon and Zach have both talked about this, is robotaxi. That
Right.
once the robotaxi network goes live, which is, let's say, 2 or 3 years from now, and if you follow this legislation out, if you start building a battery factory today, it's not producing batteries for a couple of years.
That's right.
So if you're expecting you're going to be in the robotaxi business in 3 years, then maybe it doesn't make sense to go too heavy into battery production, even though it's a good margin. Because if you're making 90% margins on robotaxi, and that's going to be an insane business. Maybe it's more than 100% margin. I don't even know if it's possible, but the profit story on robotaxi is so high, you might not want to divert your attention into batteries.
That's right.
So
And even Tesla is as big and as well as they do with engineering, they're still limited by how many good people that they have, the teams that they have.
right, do you want to focus your people on building battery cells and take those people away from building robotaxis? If you believe you're going to have a robotaxi business, and the robotaxi business is going to be best served by your custom your own designed robotaxi, which we're going to find out about probably next year and be built in 2024, you want your engineering resources going to build the thing that's going to make you higher margins. And the robotaxi production is going to generate higher margins than the battery production.
Right.
So I think Tesla's probably content to let Panasonic and LG Chem and CATL and others make money on batteries, and let Tesla make more money on vehicles and software, like robotaxi.
And we haven't even mentioned Tesla Bot yet.
Right.
There's a rumor, there was some talk online about how Tesla is recruiting more people in Tesla Bot than other areas. I don't know if that's by position or number of people. That was interesting to see that this week.
That again is, Elon sees, this is one of those things about having a CEO who, number one, has unlimited power within the company. Like Herbert Diess only had a limited amount of power in Volkswagen, and he found out how much power he had. Elon can't get fired, right? He's the largest shareholder, and everyone believes in him. And he could, in the words of the previous president, he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and we'd still love him. So Elon has unlimited power, so he can call. A typical CEO has to worry about the next quarter. And Elon can say, I'm not worried about the next quarter. I'm worried about 5-10 years from now. And if he sees, and I think he does, that Tesla Bot is going to be a game changer, not just for Tesla and profits, but really to make the world a better place. And he's focused on that. And I think Zach sees it, and I think Drew sees it. And I think I think the Tesla team sees it. If that's where the future lies, then Elon's able to say, I'm not going to worry about making an extra $4 billion a year in profit on battery cells from a tax credit. I'm going to focus on making $1 trillion a year on these bots.
Yeah.
Right. And not just making $1 trillion a year, but solving labor shortages and providing labor to take care of elderly people who, jobs that humans don't want to do. There's a lot of ways in which the robo-taxi changes the game, and the bot changes the game, and makes the world a better place, and makes us shareholders, happy.
Yeah.
Wealthy and happy. Turns us into Teslanaires.
That's right.
ElonBits.com. Sorry.
Going back full circle to Giga Nevada, that was never fulfilled, their original vision, because they couldn't find enough workers to locate to Reno, Nevada. Maybe eventually they add Tesla Bot to Reno, Nevada, and then you
Oh,
know,
Tesla bot does the work. No, so
yeah,
so this is a very common mistake. I'm sorry, but I think this is a very common mistake that people make is they think the Tesla bot is going to be critical in factories. They already have robots in factories. They have purpose-built robots in factories that do the tasks that require the most automation. And there may be some role for Tesla bots inside factories, but the real value in Tesla bot is in the world, in the entire space that humans occupy.
yeah, that's
Uh,
just a whole much bigger problem for them to solve. I think it makes it slower for them to be able to use the
No, I
Tesla
think no,
vision and all that.
I think that there are probably a lot of tasks in the rest of the world that are going to be easier to train bot for than training it to do factory work. I think people underestimate how hard factory work is, and they don't realize. Here, I'll give you my favorite example of where Tesla bot's going to matter. You own a property that needs security,
Right.
and currently you have 10 security cards walking around the property looking for problems.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you could say, you know what, I'm only going to need 5 human security guards and I'm going to deploy 10 bots in addition to my 5 security guards. And my bots are just going to walk around the property and they're going to observe. And if they see something problematic, they're going to relay that back to the center. And then we'll deploy a human security guard when necessary. And there's 2 things going on with bot. One is there's probably more than 2 things, but there's 2 critical things that I see. One is it has to navigate space. That's what FSD does. FSD takes a given space and it navigates space. In the case of FSD, it navigates roads. Bot is going to have to navigate more complex spaces, but that's step 1. Step 2 is at some point, bot is going to manipulate objects, something that FSD doesn't do. Pick something up, lift it, move it, put it here, twist a screwdriver, whatever. There's all kinds of things that go on with manipulating objects. So that security work that I described does not require manipulating objects. It's just walking around and looking and observing space. Right. So I think that is a much easier task to train bot for. And I think there's a lot of things that humans will be able to do with bot that will be easier to train bot for than factory work.
So you're having it have to walk along uneven ground.
Sure.
And dealing with humans, and maybe it won't deal with humans. Maybe it'll just stand there.
Well, it'll take orders. Hey, go walk over there. And a human approaches and threatens it. It's not going to fight the human. It's just going to relay to the security guards, hey, there's a threat here.
Right. But in the factory, you have a limited environment. You have a limited number of corner cases. You can also take humans out of that room, so you don't even have humans doing weird things to throw the robot off. And the robots, they don't have to be manipulating wires and weird dangly things. Like robots could be loading boxes. Robots could be feeding the other robots in the factories.
Yeah, I just think the vast majority of that stuff that you're describing that the bots can automate is already automated. And I don't think there's a lot of gain for. I'm not saying you're wrong. Okay, my gut feel is that people ask Elon about the bots in factories, and he says sure. But and like my vision, I think I may have asked you about this before. I've asked other people this before. If Tesla came out and said, "Hey, we've got our first generation bot and we're ready to put it in beta, $50,000, and you get a bot, and the bot is largely useless, but you get to take it home and you can walk it through whatever environments you want, and it'll be capable of doing some minimal things, and it won't be very useful, but you can show it off to your friends and you can take it for walks and you can have it do things. And then every month or so, we're going to send you an update and your bot's going to get more capable." Would you pay $50,000 for a bot?
Well, I think a lot of entrepreneurs would. So
I just mean for fun. It's not useful for your career. It's not useful for your work. It's like, I want to have a bot and I want to show it off, and they're going to sell 10,000 of them to beta testers, right? Yeah. And we pay $50,000 for the privilege of helping Tesla train their bots, right?
Yeah, I just don't know why. Like, corner cases are making FSD hard for Tesla to solve. They are working through it. They are doing some cool things. And the recent talk by Ashok about occlusions and nerfs and all this stuff is very cool. But you put this in people's homes, you multiply the corner cases exponentially.
But that's how you accelerate the learning. That's the whole point. Not just putting in people's homes. I'm going to go take it for a walk in the woods. I'm going to take it for a walk on the beach. I got a beach right here. I'm going to take it for a walk on the beach. I'm going to take it for a walk down a crowded street with pedestrians all over the place. or, you know, various obstacles. That's the whole point. That's how it learns. It doesn't learn from being in a constrained environment. It learns better from being in a widely varied environment.
Yeah.
That's how you accelerate the learning. That's how the goal isn't to just make Tesla's factories a little more efficient. The goal is to create something that makes human society more efficient. And, you know, my mother passed away recently, but she was in an assisted living facility. And one of the crappy jobs, literally crappy jobs in an assisted living facility, is cleaning up when an older person soils themselves.
Right.
Right. And not only is it crappy, but there's actually like danger of disease. You know, it's unpleasant and there's some danger to it. And that's, if you can train a bot to do that and take that and leave the human to do the comforting, and the reassuring and the nice side of taking care of people, while somebody takes care of the ugly side of taking care of people, that the bot takes care of that. You know, there's so many places in our society, you know, like I worked at Burger King when I was a kid. If the bot takes out the garbage and mops the floors and cleans the walls and cleans the greasy, you know, stuff out, and the humans get to talk to the customers and you know, hand the burger over, that, you know, that frees humans from doing the unpleasant work and the dangerous work. And, you know, I got grease in my eyes from working on the grill.
Wow.
You know, I had to go to an eye doctor because some grease flew out of the grill and hit me in the eyes. You know, if the bot can handle the more dangerous stuff, great. I'm okay. That was 38 years ago. I'm okay. Don't sweat it. So did you have some napkin math to discuss?
No, I think we kind of handled most of it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're potentially looking at, let's just go back to that really quick. For those who are shareholders, I want to take that and turn that for a second. So you and I see maybe 2024, Tesla's getting an extra 3.5 or $4.5 billion a year in profit from these tax credits, right? Not to mention that there's not to mention that their suppliers, Panasonic with 2 factories in Oklahoma and Kansas, and others that are going to have battery cell factories, other opportunities that their suppliers are maybe going to getting them lower cost because Tesla might be capturing some of that break. But just start with, let's say, $4.5 billion a year in extra profit for Tesla. And now when Wall Street analysts figure this out, wait a minute, Tesla's got a 100 gigawatt hour battery factory in Texas. And that means they're going to make an extra $3.5 or $4.5 billion a year in profit. At some point, Wall Street analysts are going to price that in and say, hey, wait a minute, we have to raise Tesla stock valuation, right? And investors, Wall Street investors say, wait a minute, this company is worth more than I thought. And I feel like there's a whole bunch of things coming that I kind of wanted to talk to you about before we wrap up. I think we have Q3 deliveries, we have Q3 earnings, we have Q4 deliveries in early January and Q4 earnings call in late January. My gut is that there's certain things, like people talk about FSD beta as going to be this thing that's going to at some point trigger investors to say, okay, we're going to invest in Tesla now. I don't think that Wall Street's going to get FSD beta until there's a robotaxi network running,
right?
Or the take rate shoots up. If the take rate doubles, then Wall Street will notice it. But until there's the fact that there's this really cool software out there does not trigger Wall Street to increase value of stock. But I think Wall Street estimates are something like 360,000 deliveries for Q3, and Troy Teslike is more like 368,000, and I think 380,000 is likely for Q3. I think I looked at Troy's numbers. Troy is assuming no growth in Fremont. It was really bizarre. Like, and I looked at his numbers, like, why isn't Fremont growing? In fact, Model 3 and Model Y production, he has Model 3 and Model Y production shrinking in Fremont overall. As you know, S and X production increases, for some reason 3 and X decrease. And actually, sorry, you mentioned Megapack going to lithium iron phosphate, which I think it already has gone to lithium iron phosphate. They've announced a new Megapack. It's got higher capacity, and I believe it's very clearly a lithium iron phosphate battery pack.
And it's bigger too, heavier.
Right, but there's a key point to this. Megapack was using either 1865 or 2170 cells, or both. If they're going to stop using 1865 and 2170 cells for Megapack, that frees up cells for Tesla to make more Model 3s and more Model Ys and more S's and X's. right? If I'm not mistaken, if they were making 4 gigawatt hours of megapacks using these cells, they now have 4 gigawatt hours more cells to put into Model 3s, Model Ys, whatever. And one of my theories I mentioned before, this Tesla's ability to be flexible on a country level, but they're also capable of being flexible on a battery level. And they announced semis coming this year instead of next year.
Right.
And my theory on that is they've decided, because were you at gig at the, and you were at the annual shareholders meeting.
Yeah, I was. You said hi to me at the very end. I was looking for my bus.
but we got the tour.
Yeah.
And when you were there for Cyber Rodeo as well, right?
Yeah.
When we were there for Cyber Rodeo, they showed us the 4680 Model Y line that they were planning.
Mm-hmm.
And when they gave us the tour at the annual shareholder meeting, that space was being used for 2170 Model Y, not for 4680 Model Y.
Mm-hmm.
And my theory is that the gain from producing 4680 Model Ys with the current generation of 4680 and the current generation of structural pack is not that great. And Tesla may have said, you know what, we're going to have this additional supply of 2170s because Panasonic and LG Chem are increasing production and because we're not using them in megapacks anymore. And we're just going to make 2170 Model Ys, or we're going to make fewer 4680 Model Ys. And we're going to take those 4680s and we're going to start semi-early.
Mm-hmm.
That it might make sense to focus 4680 towards semi and Cybertruck and leave Model Y as 2170 until you have a really game-changing 4680 structural pack Model Y, which the current generation 4680 structural pack Model Y is not a game changer. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I feel like it's more just because of maybe 4680 was slower to ramp. They are like doubling production every 3 or so months on 4680, but it's just slower than they thought. Last year, Drew and Elon thought they would get to a 100 gigawatt hour run rate on 4680 worldwide.
By the end of this year.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen.
I tend to agree with you. Well, I mean, certainly, part of that was going to be Berlin's cell factory, and Berlin's cell factory isn't even completed yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, but it may be that the 2170 cell supply has grown enough that they don't need to bother making 4680 Model Ys in any volume. They can divert those cells to semi and Cybertruck, which the gain for 4680 and semi and Cybertruck is much bigger than the gain for 4680 and Model Y, at least now.
LG, as far as I'm aware, has come through for Tesla as far as making more 2170s. So
right.
That's definitely helped them. And I've heard that the majority of what they're doing at Giga Texas is 2170 right now.
Right. I wonder if they've even shut down the 4680 Model Y production. Because I haven't heard people talking about, hey, I got a new Austin Model Y with 4680. There was a period of time where we were hearing people. There's this guy Gregory on Clubhouse who got a 4680 Model Y, and it's almost like all talk about 4680 Model Y seems to have disappeared.
Yeah.
So I just mean, there's this point. I want to get back to this point though. That one is that Tesla, because of their ability to use a variety of different cells. So like GM is standardizing on Ultium.
Yeah.
Right. They've got whatever the hell that is. I think it's a lithium iron phosphate. I'm not even sure. Ford, I think, is standardizing on one battery. I think Volkswagen has more than one battery cell that they're working with, but it's a limited array. Tesla will work with whatever batteries they can get. You want us to use structural pack, BYD, blade battery? Sure, we can do that. You want lithium iron phosphate? You want us to use lithium iron phosphate prismatics from CATL? Sure. 2170, 1865, 4680. Tesla can flex and use all kinds of different battery cells all over the place, and they can manipulate production in different factories around the world. They can produce in China and deliver to Europe if they need to. They can produce in battery packs in China and deliver them to the United States for standard range Model 3 or something like that. There's a lot of flexibility that Tesla has that other manufacturers don't have, and that's an advantage. Yeah. But I want to come back to this point that I see all of these things becoming like, at some point, some of these things hit Wall Street. Right. And Wall Street investors say, hey, wait a minute, they delivered more than we inspected in Q3. And now we look at Q4 and say, wait a minute, if this is what they delivered in Q3 and the hurdles of July are out of the way, then Q4, they might deliver 500,000 vehicles. Remember, they said they were going to hit a run rate of 2 million vehicles by the end of the year. Yeah. So they might be close to 500,000 vehicles in Q4. You put that together with, wait a minute, there's this tax credit and there's, 3.5 or $4.5 billion a year in extra profits in a year or so. do you think Wall Street investors are what's going to trigger? And then there's the credit rating upgrade that we anticipate that S&P and Moody's will at some point agree to a credit rating. I'm talking to Alexandra later this week about that and other things. When you add all that together, I don't tend to be a short-term guy. I don't tend to worry about when the share price is going to jump in the short run, because you and I are both looking 5-10 years down the road. But I do think Wall Street investors at some point have got to figure out, wait a minute, this is way more than $1 trillion company. Right. I don't want to get into pre-split and post-split or whatever. Let's say it's a $300 stock, whatever, but it's $1 trillion company roughly.
Yeah.
And when they piece together the profit story and they piece together the growth story, at some point you got to say, wait a minute, this company's really worth $2.5 trillion. And maybe they'll take them a while to catch up to that, but they're going to go above $1 trillion soon in market cap valuation, right? Do you see Wall Street catching on at some point?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a skeptic on that. Wall Street, and this is something that Alex Potter kind of pointed out with Tesla Daily, is they want to be able to hardcore defend their reasoning, and they don't want to be wrong by being over optimistic. So what Wall Street tends to do is they wait until these different aspects you're talking about are showing through to the earnings. I think that creates opportunities for you and I, but I don't think they're necessarily going to bake in these tax credits from this advanced part of the bill until it actually flows through into Tesla profits.
Really? So you can see the writing on the wall. They have a 100 gigawatt hour battery factory in Texas. They got a 10 gigawatt hour battery factory in Cato Road. We see this tax credit. We understand how this translates to the bottom line next year, and we're going to give zero for that.
Yeah, right now, Texas, I think they're higher now. Maybe they're at 2 gigawatt hours, but I think 3 months ago they were at a 1 gigawatt hour run rate. So, Wall Street's more like, prove it to us, Elon. They're in prove it mode ever since they got burned in the first quarter of 2019. And Elon and Zach saying, hey, we're going to be profitable from now on. We're going to be self-funding from now on. It wasn't quite true, when they said that each time. And Wall Street got majorly burned when Tesla first sent their cars on boats to Europe, and they didn't get them all delivered by quarter end. So they've been snake bitten by these things as far as looking too far forward. But I agree with you. Right now, China for this quarter is going to be a little on the low side to what they can do. A good portion of the factory was shut down in July, and
I think it was 2 weeks for Model 3 and 2 weeks for Model 3. It wasn't that bad.
But that's some potential that's going to go into the fourth quarter. So I think there's some opportunity for them to realize, okay, well, maybe Tesla can do above 440,000 in the fourth quarter, and then it keeps growing from there.
That's why I was saying if you get to early January, and January 2nd, you get your delivery numbers, and Tesla delivered 496,000 vehicles in Q4, let's say. Right? I'm making up a number, but I'm just pulling a number out of
I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. Well, even if it's 480,000, right? If they deliver a larger number, and then you and I both know the more they deliver, the profits go up more than the deliveries. Right? And then you have average selling price.
Tremendous leverage in the business. So
and average selling price has been going up. So revenue increases faster than deliveries, and profits increase faster than revenue. So I think when you get to late January and you get the earnings call for Q4, January 20th, 21st, 22nd, something like that, I think there's something that's going to flip the switch for Wall Street, and they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, we're massively undervaluing this company.
Yeah. Well, I think Wall Street's going to see that they're way too low on 2023 estimates. I think that they do over $5 in the fourth quarter, probably closer to $5.50 or more. And Wall Street's going to realize they should be at 24 or more for 2023. And I think they're at 17 right now.
Yeah, which is absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think 24 is low. I mean, if you do $6 a share effectively in Q4 of 2022, then you would expect to do a minimum of $6 a share in the first quarter.
Right.
And then it just goes up.
Yeah, 2024 is probably too low too. Yeah.
I think I've got 2023 at like $32 a share. I'm not value analyst crazy, and Yaman is like $50 a share. But I mean, there is that.
He's at 40.
Oh, is he at 40? I think I saw 50 on Twitter, but he's random. I think he said 50 on Twitter today. But if FSD delivers at some point and the take rate goes up,
yeah,
that's another thing that can really be a driver. Is if all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're in wide release, and which is maybe the end of this year, maybe early next year, and Lisa Tesla Truth says, oh my God, this is amazing, right? If they can persuade Lisa, right? They persuaded Chuck. 10.69 seems to be swaying Chuck Cook a little bit. So I think you said you had a hard out in 4 minutes. So is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
I think we covered it all. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's just an exciting time. It's interesting. I would say in general with this legislation, what it's pointed out to me is that I think we all have good intentions. And we all relied on different voices to tell us what's going on with the legislation. And I think one thing this reminded me of is that we need to go to the source and see what it actually says. A lot of news articles, they'll just summarize and then they'll lie about what happened. And when you go and watch the speech, or you go and read the report or whatever, you find out that there's a whole lot more to the story. So I just encourage people to continue to dig deep, and appreciate you and appreciate the community here. On Twitter, I'm Brad S. Ferguson, and you can go to hffinancial.com, and Warren's going to link to the article, and you can
and your Twitter
out there. Yep. Yeah.
I might even link to your interview with Jordan. It was fairly similar to what we talked about, but there's more in there that we didn't cover.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Bradford, thank you very much. For everyone else, please support this channel on the Locals platform, on Patreon, or as a YouTube channel member. Check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com. Links to all that in the description below. Check out my other videos. Subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you, Bradford Ferguson, for enlightening us about this.
Yep. Bye for now.